Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave an interview to Yaakov Bardugo. Yaakov Bardugo is one of the most respected journalists and political analysts in Israel on the more nationalist, more right-wing side of the spectrum. And Prime Minister Netanyahu sat down with him for a half-hour interview. They talked about a wide range of issues, but I want to focus in on the things that Prime Minister Netanyahu said about the ceasefire and about his relationship with the Biden administration.
ראש הממשלה בנימין נתניהו.
ערב טוב.
למה עכשיו, אתה יכול להגיד לנו למה עכשיו אנחנו עוצרים את המלחמה הזו בלבנון? יש ביקורת מימין, משמאל, למה עכשיו?
דווקא משום שהשגנו בדיוק מה שכיוונו להשיג. אנחנו אמרנו שבלבנון אנחנו נכה את חיזבאללה מכה אחת אפיים, הרבה יותר מזה, וניצור את התנאים להחזרת תושבינו בצפון. זה בדיוק מה שאנחנו עושים. אנחנו ננצל את הפסקת האש. לא אמרתי סיום המלחמה, הפסקת האש. מה שיקרה תלוי במה שיקרה.
הפסקת אש יכולה להיות גם רבת שנים, יש גם הפסקות אש של עשרות שנים.
אבל יכולה להיות גם קצרה, אנחנו אכפנו אותה כבר ביום הראשון, ראית? אתמול הרגנו 5 אנשי חיזבאללה, שבינו 4, היום תקפנו עוד. אין אצלנו חוכמות. אנחנו אוכפים בעוצמה. אבל אם צריך, אני נתתי דירקטיבה לצה"ל. תהיו ערוכים, במקרה שיש הפרה של המתווה הזה, של הפסקת האש, למלחמה עצימה. מה אנחנו נעשה בהפסקת האש? קודם כל, אנחנו נתחמש. נרענן כוחות ונתחמש בייצור עצמי אדיר. השבוע אישרנו בוועדת שרים התעצמות אדירה של צה"ל, בייצור עצמי. במקביל, אנחנו גם נקבל חימוש שחלקו נעצר מארצות הברית, ואני ארוך...
אמברגו הנשק של ביידן בלינקן נפסק, דיברת על זה גם על דוכן הכנסת וגם בהצהרה שלך השבוע.
היו אלמנטים, מרכיבי נשק וציוד שלא הגיעו אלינו, ואני יכול להגיד לך שאני בטוח שהם יגיעו אלינו, יכול להיות שהם יגיעו כבר עכשיו, עוד בתקופת המעבר של הממשלים, אבל הנשיא טראמפ אמר לי חד משמעית שמבחינתו לא יהיה עיכוב של שום נשק.
Let's just sum up. Prime Minister Netanyahu pointed out 3 critical points about this ceasefire. First and foremost, right at the outset, he insisted that the ceasefire is not meant to be permanent, that it's meant to be a temporary ceasefire, not an end to the war. Now, what's so important about this, it is a complete contradiction to what was said by President Joe Biden. In Joe Biden's statement announcing this ceasefire, he explicitly says that the goal of this is to be a permanent ceasefire. But Netanyahu was saying, no, it is not. Second important thing that Netanyahu said, and it relates to the first, obviously, is that Israel is aggressively retaliating against every infraction of this ceasefire. Even the slightest infraction, Israel is fighting back. So Hezbollah immediately started testing the ceasefire. Hezbollah fighters immediately started getting back into areas, moving back into areas in the south of Lebanon that they're not allowed to be in. They immediately started getting active around their rocket launchers and their weapons depots. And as that activity began, the Israelis attacked them. So Israel is not wasting a second. With even the slightest infraction of this ceasefire, they're attacking them. Now, this is a big change. In the past, in the Middle East, when Israel has signed ceasefire deals with its various terrorist neighbors, even though there's been a ceasefire deal, when there's been a little bit of activity on the other side, even though there's what we might consider minor violations, Israel's kind of turned a blind eye to it and let it go to keep the ceasefire going. And here, Prime Minister Netanyahu is being adamant, and we see that since the ceasefire was signed, and even since this interview in the few days, Israel has continued to aggressively attack anytime there's been any violation. Now, the third critical piece of information that Prime Minister Netanyahu revealed in this part of the interview is that, yes, in fact, the rumors are true that there was a partial arms embargo, that the United States government was withholding certain weaponry, preventing Israel from having whatever it needs to win the war, and that President Trump promised Prime Minister Netanyahu that that will not continue. Let me also stress that the weapons we're talking about are weapons that Israel has purchased from the United States that have been held back. And they've caused the deaths of Israeli soldiers. They've also meant that Israel has not been able to win this war as quickly as they could. When we ask ourselves, why does the Biden administration want a ceasefire here? What are they trying to accomplish? Let's get to that in a minute. But first, let's watch Prime Minister Netanyahu tell Yaakov Bardugo the story of the decision to assassinate the head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah.
ולדעתי אולי החשוב מכולם היה החיסול של נסראללה. אני הבנתי שנסראללה הוא הציר של הציר. ואם נפגע בו, נפגע אנושות לא רק בחיזבאללה, אלא בכל ציר הרשע האיראני. וכאן היה ויכוח.
היו מי שהתנגדו למבצעים האלה, ראש הממשלה, אתה יכול להגיד מי התנגד ולמה?
תראה, היו דיונים רציניים מאוד בקבינט, והעלו שתי התנגדויות, שתי הסתגלויות. אחד, זה יכול להביא למלחמה רחבה עם איראן, וזה נכון, אי אפשר היה לבטל את זה. והדרישה השנייה הייתה לעדכן את ארצות הברית. והדרישה השנייה פסלתי על הסף. כי אם היינו מבקשים אישור, יכול להיות שלא היינו מבצעים, או שזה היה דולף. ולגבי השאלה הראשונה של איראן, אמרתי, בסדר, בוא נדון בזה. אני חושב שאנחנו במערכה עם איראן בכל מקרה. ואני הבנתי שנסראללה, פגיעה בנסראללה זה פגיעה קשה מאוד, גם בחיזבאללה וגם בציר, ולכן אי אפשר לוותר על זה. הדיון הזה נמשך לתוך הלילה, כשאני אמור לנאום באו"ם אחרי 20 שעות.
זה התרגיל שנסעת לארצות הברית, שאתה יודע שאתה הולך להוריד את נסראללה ביום שישי?
לא.
כמה שעות אחרי הנאום שלך?
זה לא היה תרגיל, אבל אנחנו לא חשפנו את התוכניות שלנו. בכל אופן, הפסקתי את ישיבת הקבינט, הדעות היו חצויות. ואמרתי, בסדר. האמריקנים, עניין עדכון האמריקנים פסלתי, אבל אני רוצה לחשוב על העניין של המלחמה, אני אחזור עליכם. חלק מהאנשים ישבו ברווחה, כי הם חשבו שעד שאני אחזור, נסראללה בלאו הכי יעלם מהתמונה, ילך לאיזה מקום מסתור אחר. אבל עליתי על כנף ציון, שיש לו רק דבר אחד שלא היה במטוסים אחרים, מערכת קשר. מערכת קשר מובטחת. ישנתי שעתיים, הרמתי את הטלפון, שר הביטחון לרמטכ"ל, אמרתי, החלטתי. אנחנו הולכים עליו. אנחנו לוקחים את כל הסיכון, כי זה שווה את הסיכון. כשהגעתי לניו יורק, למלון ריג'נסי, חיברתי את כל הקבינט לדיון טלפוני, והתקבלה החלטה לבקשתי, לחסל אותו, וכשהלכתי לו, אני אמרתי, דרך אגב, אתם יכולים להתקן את האמריקנים, פחות או יותר כשמטוסים באוויר, אבל הכוונה הייתה ברורה, אנחנו מורידים את נסראללה.
Wow. So in this clip, I want to draw your attention to maybe the most critical point Netanyahu makes about this whole story of killing Hassan Nasrallah, and that is that he absolutely forbade anyone leaking this to the Americans. There were, as he said in the story, there were members of his cabinet who wanted to consult with the Americans about the assassination of Nasrallah, and Netanyahu put his foot down and said, absolutely not, we're not telling the Americans, because if we tell the Americans, listen to what he said, it either won't happen at all or they will leak it. Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying the quiet part out loud. We no longer trust the Americans because this U.S. administration has been making moves ever since the beginning of this war to try to protect Hamas, to try to protect Hezbollah. Now, you might say, wait a second, they're giving Israel all these weapons. They moved an aircraft carrier into the Mediterranean. They've been protecting Israel. Yes and no. They don't want Israel to be destroyed, but they have been forcing Israel to back off and slow down at every point of this war because their goal is to protect Hamas and Hezbollah. Let me explain what I mean by that. If we ask a simple question about how the Americans are behaving right now, why is the Biden administration escalating things in Russia and Ukraine in that war, but they're de-escalating and trying to reach a ceasefire in the Middle East? Well, if they're trying to leave Trump with intractable problems that he can't solve, why not cause a flare-up in the Middle East? Why not escalate there too, just like they're doing in Ukraine? Well, it's actually pretty simple and pretty insidious what they're doing here. You see, the Biden administration knows that Trump wants to be perceived as the president who brings peace. Trump has said repeatedly on the campaign trail and also from his behavior during his first administration, Trump believes in achieving peace through strength. Trump wants to end conflicts. He's been saying this all along throughout the campaign, that when he comes into office, he's going to end these wars that are going on all over the world. So they know that Trump wants to be perceived as a president who brings peace. Now, but Trump, even though he is the president of peace, he's not an appeaser. He believes in ending conflict in what he calls peace through strength, which means coming down hard on the bad actors as a way of ending the hostilities. So if there was an active war, an active kinetic shooting war going on between Israel and Hezbollah on January 20th when Trump takes office, what's Trump going to do? He's going to gather his national security team around him, which includes people like Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio at this point, who are very hawkish on Iran. He'll bring the Israelis into the conversation. And President Trump will turn to the people he trusts and say, hey guys, what do we need to do to end this war as quickly as possible? And they'll say to him, well, if you give Israel what it needs to win, they can have this thing over with pretty quickly. And that's what Trump would do. And that could mean the end of Hezbollah. It could mean the end of the reign of terror of the mullahs in Iran. And it could mean the end of Hamas. But the Biden administration is trying to save Iran, they're trying to save Hezbollah, and they're trying to save Hamas. So by implementing a ceasefire, a 60-day ceasefire that extends past January 20th, the Biden administration is trying to ensure that Trump comes into office with an active ceasefire in place, meaning that there's no hostilities, there's no active shooting war going on between Israel and Hezbollah. In that situation, although Trump is not an appeaser, he also doesn't want any flare-ups. He doesn't want hostilities resuming under his watch. And therefore, he will not give Israel as free a hand to operate against Hezbollah if there's no active shooting war when he comes into power, which he would have if the war was ongoing. And that's why the Biden administration has forced this ceasefire on Prime Minister Netanyahu, on the Israelis. He threatened the Israelis that if they did not agree to this ceasefire deal, that the Americans would allow the passage of a binding resolution by the UN Security Council forcing a worse deal on Israel, forcing a ceasefire that would be far worse for Israel and would be far more difficult to get out of. So that's what the Biden administration is doing. And in this interview, reading between the lines, Prime Minister Netanyahu has revealed that under this Biden administration, during the course of this war, we've reached a point where the Israelis no longer trust the Americans, and they realize that the Americans are working on behalf of Israel's enemies to keep Israel from winning the war.